The storm of hyperspace swirled around Anakin Skywalker, a cascade of blue and white streaks that wrapped his Jedi starfighter in an eerie glow. His fingers tightened on the controls, his pulse steady, his mind focused. He was young, only 13, but the Force had always made him different. Faster, stronger, sharper than others. Master Obi-Wan had sent him ahead to scout the Separatist movements near the Outer Rim. It was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance mission. No engagements, no heroics, just observation. But as he adjusted his course, an ominous presence rippled through the Force, sending a chill down his spine. Then, without warning, reality cracked. A vortex of raw energy tore open before him, unlike anything he had ever seen. The edges pulsed with unnatural light, a hungry, swirling maw of distorted space. His astromech, R4, let out a frantic series of beeps, warning of an imminent gravitational collapse. Anakin barely had time to react before the vortex pulled him in. The ship tumbled, the stars blurred, the cockpit alarms shrieked as gravitational forces battered the frame. Anakin clenched his teeth and reached out with the Force, trying to stabilize the ship. But the energies surrounded him were beyond anything he had ever encountered. The Force itself felt wrong, twisted, warped, and then blackness. When Anakin awoke, he was lying on cold, metallic ground. His body ached as he pushed himself up, his eyes adjusting to the dim, artificial lighting that flickered above him. His starfighter was gone. His lightsaber, however, remained strapped to his belt, the reassuring weight a small comfort in an unknown world. He was in a vast hall, its architecture grand yet severe. Towering Gothic arches stretched overhead, lined with golden sigils and banners bearing symbols he did not recognize. The air smelled of metal, incense, and something ancient. Heavy footfalls echoed in the distance. Instinctively, Anakin reached for his weapon, his breath steadying as he prepared for the unknown. Then they appeared, and they were giants, towering figures clad in immense golden armor, their presence radiating authority and power. They moved with precision, their crimson-plumed helmets gleaming in the dim light. Their weapons, long, elegant halberds that pulsed with barely contained energy, looked designed for both ceremony and slaughter. But they did not attack. Instead, they stopped before him, forming a semicircle. One of them, the tallest of the group, stepped forward and spoke in a voice deep as thunder. "The boy is awake," another warrior nodded. "He is different. The Emperor will want to see him." Anakin, despite the odds, held his ground. "Where am I? Who are you?" His voice was steady, his hand still hovering near his lightsaber. The leader regarded him for a long moment before speaking. "You stand in the Imperial Palace on Terra. You are in the presence of the Adeptus Custodes, and you, child, are to be judged by the Emperor of Mankind." Anakin frowned. Terra. The name was unfamiliar, and yet something deep within whispered to him that he was no longer in his galaxy. The Force, though still within him, felt different, heavy and ancient. "You will come with us," the custodian continued, motioning for Anakin to follow. "Do not resist." Anakin had little choice. The journey through the palace was surreal. The halls stretched endlessly, adorned with golden statues and massive banners depicting the might of the Imperium. Every corridor felt sacred, filled with a silent reverence that bordered on oppressive. Eventually, they reached an enormous chamber. Its vastness was beyond comprehension. The throne room. At its centre, upon an immense golden throne, sat a figure unlike any Anakin had ever seen. The Emperor of mankind. His form radiated power, his golden armour resplendent, his eyes burning with an intensity that felt like it could strip away the very soul of those who gazed upon him. He did not move, yet his presence filled the chamber, vast and inescapable. The custodians knelt. Anakin, however, remained standing. A long silence stretched between them before the Emperor finally spoke, his voice resonating through the very air itself. "You are not of this universe." Anakin's breath hitched. You know that?" The Emperor's gaze bore into him, his golden eyes flickering with unreadable emotion. "I see beyond time, beyond space. You are a ripple in the currents of fate. You do not belong. And yet, the warp has delivered you here. Why?" Anakin swallowed. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, but he forced himself to meet the Emperor's gaze. "I don't know how I got here, but I need to return. My people, my master, they need me." The Emperor studied him for what felt like an eternity. "You wield power, a power unlike the psychers of my Imperium. You call it the Force." Anakin's eyes widened. "You know of the Force?" The Emperor's expression remained unreadable. "I know of many things, and I see the potential in you. Power, unrestrained, unchecked. If left untamed, it could lead to ruin." Anakin stiffened. "I won't let that happen. I fight for peace, for justice. That's why I became a Jedi." The Emperor leaned forward, the sheer presence of his will pressing against Anakin's mind. Peace, justice. Such things are illusions in a universe consumed by war. You have not seen what I have seen, child. You have not fought the horrors that lurk in the darkness beyond the stars. You are strong, but you are not ready. Anakin clenched his fists. "Then teach me." The custodian stirred at his words, but the Emperor simply watched him. Then, after a long pause, he spoke. "Very well." Anakin felt his heart race as the Emperor slowly stood from his throne. The room seemed to darken, the sheer weight of his presence nearly suffocating. "You will be trained, not as a Jedi, but as something more. You will learn discipline, control, and in time, you may come to understand the true nature of power." Anakin exhaled, feeling the gravity of his fate settle upon him. "But know this," the Emperor continued, stepping closer, his voice low and heavy with meaning. "You will be tested, your soul, your will, your very essence. If you are weak, you will be cast aside. If you falter, you will be destroyed." Anakin did not hesitate. He met the Emperor's burning gaze and nodded. "I won't fail." A flicker of something, approval, amusement, crossed the Emperor's face before vanishing. He turned away, returning to his throne. "Then we shall see Anakin Skywalker." The custodians led Anakin from the chamber, the massive doors closing behind him with a resounding boom. In that moment, as he walked through the golden halls of Terra, Anakin knew one truth. His destiny had forever changed. The galaxy would never be the same again. The dawn bell echoed through the Imperial Palace. its solemn chime a signal that training was about to begin. Anakin Skywalker awoke instantly. His mind was already alert, his body still aching from the previous day's grueling exercises. There was no time for recovery. The Emperor of mankind had made it clear. His training would be relentless. His chamber was devoid of luxury, a far cry from the relevant comfort of the Jedi Temple. The stone walls bore no decoration, only the stark insignia of the Imperium. He had learned quickly that this was not a place of contemplation or philosophy. It was a place of discipline, of war. The doors slid open with a heavy clang, revealing a towering figure clad in golden armor. Shield Captain Valerian. "Move," the custodian commanded. Anakin obeyed without hesitation, falling in line as he was led through the labyrinthine corridors of the palace. The air smelled of oil and incense, a constant reminder of the fusion between faith and war that governed this place. They entered the Hall of Discipline, a vast training ground where Imperial warriors honed their skills. Custodians sparred against one another, their power weapons clashing with devastating force. Human recruits drilled with precision, their faces hardened by years of training. At the center stood a collection of weapons: bolters, power swords, and chain axes, each too heavy for an ordinary man to wield. Valerian turned to him. "Choose your weapon." Anakin didn't hesitate. He reached for his lightsaber, the familiar weight of it a comfort. The custodians watched impassively, their unreadable visors giving nothing away. Valerian's voice was cold. "You cling to a relic of a weak order." Anakin smirked. "Let's see if you can prove that." Valerian struck first, his guardian spear blurring as it came down like a thunderbolt. Anakin barely dodged, rolling to the side as the spear cracked the stone where he had stood. The custodian was impossibly fast for his size. Then Anakin retaliated, his lightsaber flashing in a precise arc. The blade met Valerian's gauntlet, the energy dispersing harmlessly against the custodian's power field. Before Anakin could react, Valerian spun and delivered a brutal strike with the butt of his spear, knocking the young Padawan off his feet. Anakin hit the ground hard, gasping for breath. He had fought separatist droids, bounty hunters, but never anything like this. Valerian loomed over him. "You rely on instinct. That is your weakness." Anakin's fists clenched. "It's what kept me alive." Valerian stepped back. Barely. The days turned into weeks, each session pushing Anakin to his limits. He trained with the custodians, their discipline unyielding, their skills unmatched. He learned not only combat, but the tactics of war, the history of the Imperium, and the horrors of the warp. He studied alongside scholars of the Administratum, reading accounts of demonic incursions and Xenos conflicts that made the Clone Wars seem like skirmishes by comparison. Each evening, he was sent to study under the scrutiny of Imperial tutors. He learned the language of High Gothic, the intricacies of Imperial logistics, and the brutal efficiency of its war machine. Unlike the Jedi, who saw war as a last resort, the Imperium saw it as an inevitability, the natural state of existence. There was no talk of peace, only conquest, and above all, he learned from the Emperor himself. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, Anakin sat alone in his chamber, staring at his lightsaber. It was the only remnant of his old life. The Jedi had given it to him as a symbol of discipline and of protection. But now, in this brutal new world, it felt small, insufficient. A sharp knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He stood as the door opened, revealing a figure he had not expected. Malcador, the Sigillite, the Emperor's closest advisor, robed in deep crimson, his eyes ancient yet piercing. Unlike the custodians, who were warriors first and foremost, Malcador carried a different weight, the burden of knowledge. "You've made an impression," Malcador said as he stepped inside, his voice calm but firm. "The Emperor believes you may serve a greater purpose, but there are still doubts." Anakin exhaled slowly. "I can prove myself." Malcador studied him. "Power alone is not proof. It must be tempered, controlled." Anakin bristled at the words. "I can control it." "Can you?" Malcador asked, stepping closer. "Or do you simply wield it, never thinking of what it might cost?" Anakin opened his mouth to argue, but the words died in his throat. He had never questioned it before. Power had always been his greatest asset, his ability to feel, to react. Malcador sighed. "The Emperor sees much of himself in you. That is why he trains you. But he also sees something dangerous." Anakin frowned. What does he fear? Malcador's gaze was unreadable. "The same thing you should fear." The silence stretched between them, heavy and unspoken. Finally, Malcador turned. "Tomorrow, you will accompany the custodies beyond the palace. A true test awaits you." Anakin stood. "A mission?" "A purge," Malcador corrected. "A world that has defied compliance. You will see the Emperor's will enacted firsthand." Anakin hesitated. He had been tested before, but this was different. There was no Republic here, no Jedi Council to debate morality. There was only the Imperium. He nodded. "I'm ready." Malcador regarded him for a long moment before finally giving a faint smile. "We shall see." As the door closed behind him, Anakin felt a new weight settle in his chest. Tomorrow he would leave the safety of the palace. Tomorrow he would see the Imperium's truth, and he did not know if he was ready for it. The air inside the transport was thick with tension. Anakin sat in silence, surrounded by a squad of Adeptus Custodes, their golden armor gleaming even under the dim light of the dropship's interior. The rhythmic hum of the engines was the only sound between them. It had been months since he had arrived on Terra, weeks of grueling training, relentless discipline, and whispered warnings from Malcador. Now, for the first time, he was leaving the Imperial Palace, stepping into the larger reality of the Imperium. This was no diplomatic mission, no Jedi peacekeeping effort. This was war. Shield Captain Valerian stood at the front of the transport, his stance rigid as he addressed the squad. "The world below is designated Uruk's Prime," he began. "It is a hive world that once contributed its due to the Imperium. It has since fallen into rebellion, tainted by subversive elements. The population has turned against the Emperor's light. The mission is simple: compliance, by any means necessary." Anakin frowned. "By compliance?" You mean slaughter? Valerian turned his head slightly, his golden helm impassive. By compliance, I mean extermination. Anakin felt his stomach tighten. He had seen battles. He had watched friends die. But the Jedi had always taught restraint, protect the innocent, destroy only when necessary. This was something else entirely. Are there any military forces resisting? Anakin asked. Valerian nodded. PDF regiments that refused to stand down. Armed citizen militias. But their defiance is irrelevant. This world is lost. Anakin clenched his jaw. The Jedi had spoken of dark acts committed in war. To see an entire world condemned so easily. Before he could respond, the ship lurched as it entered the lower atmosphere. Outside the small viewport, flames licked against the hull as the dropship pierced through the sky. Then he saw it. Uruk's prime was burning. From above, the hive cities looked like festering wounds, black smoke rising from 1,000 fires. Once towering spires had been reduced to rubble. The air was thick with the glow of promethium flames, consuming the lower levels. In the distance, bright flashes of light illuminated the darkness. Artillery strikes, orbital bombardments. The Imperium had already begun its work. The dropship shuddered as it descended toward the ruined surface. The moment it landed, the Custodes moved with brutal efficiency, their weapons primed. The ramp dropped, and they surged forward, golden giants amidst the wreckage of a dying world. Anakin followed, his lightsaber hilt heavy in his grip. The streets of Uruk's prime were lined with corpses. Men, women, and children lay in heaps where they had fallen, some burned beyond recognition, others torn apart by bolter fire. The stench of death was suffocating. Smoke and ash filled the air, making it hard to see beyond a few meters. In the distance, a ruined statue of the Emperor loomed over the city, its head sheared off by an explosion, a symbol of defiance. A sudden burst of gunfire rang out. Anakin's instincts flared, and he dropped into a defensive stance as lasbolts zipped past him. A barricade had been set up further down the road, manned by desperate men in ragged uniforms, the remnants of Uruk's PDF forces. They were outmatched, their weapons primitive against the Custodes' armor, but still they fought. The Custodes did not hesitate. Valerian raised his guardian spear, and the squad advanced with mechanical precision. Bolters roared, sending explosive rounds tearing through flesh and bone. The defenders screamed as they were torn apart, limbs shredded, bodies flung back by the sheer force of the assault. Anakin watched, his fingers tightening around his lightsaber. These weren't Sith. They weren't separatist battle droids. These were human beings, defiant, desperate, but human nonetheless. One of the rebels broke rank, charging forward with a bayonet in blind fury. Before he could reach them, Valerian's spear impaled him through the chest, lifting him off the ground like a ragdoll before discarding him. Another rebel tried to flee, but a custodian fired a bolter round into his spine, reducing his torso to pulp. Anakin's stomach churned. This wasn't battle. This was execution. They moved deeper into the city, crushing all resistance. The screams of civilians filled the air as Imperial forces purged entire hab blocks, rooting out dissenters. The Custodes moved with cold efficiency, their golden armor untarnished amidst the carnage. Anakin felt the Force screaming around him. So much death, so much suffering. It pressed against his mind like a suffocating tide, demanding action. Then he saw them. A group of civilians, families, children, huddled inside the ruins of a collapsed hab unit. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes wide with terror as the custodies approached. One of the custodians raised his weapon. Before Anakin could act, a streak of fire arced through the air. A rocket-propelled grenade hurtled toward him, the warhead screaming like a banshee. Without thinking, he reached out with the force, his hands snapping up as his mind seized the missile mid-flight. With a desperate push, he flung the projectile aside, sending it veering into a crumbling building. The detonation was instant, a deafening shockwave ripping through the street. Dust and fire swallowed the world for a moment, obscuring all vision. The custodies braced themselves against the blast, their armor shielding them from the worst of the impact. Anakin turned to the civilians. "Run! Now!" They hesitated for only a second before scattering, disappearing into the smoke-filled alleys. As the dust settled, Valerian's gaze snapped to Anakin. His stance was rigid, unreadable beneath his golden helm. "Follow me," he ordered, "and do as you are commanded." Anakin hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. He fell in step behind Valerian, but his mind raced. Doubt gnawed at him. The Jedi had taught him that power should be used to protect the innocent, but in the Imperium of Man, power was used to crush them. And for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Anakin Skywalker was truly afraid of what he was becoming. Anakin Skywalker lay on the cot in his chamber within the Imperial Palace, staring at the ornate ceiling above him. Sleep had eluded him. His mind replayed the horrors of Uruk's prime. The screams, the fire, the indiscriminate slaughter. This was unlike anything he had ever seen. This was extermination. The Jedi had taught him that war was a last resort, that life, all life, held value. But here, in the Imperium of Man, war was the only answer, and life was expendable. Entire worlds were wiped out for defiance. Entire populations deemed unworthy of survival. And the worst part, he had stood there and watched it happen. Anakin clenched his fists. The Force still burned within him, raw and untamed, as turbulent as the thoughts in his head. Is this what the Emperor wanted of him? Is this the path he was supposed to walk? He sat up, exhaling sharply. The air in the room felt heavier, pressing against him like unseen hands. Then faintly, he heard them. The whispers. Soft at first, like the rustling of fabric in the wind. Then clearer. Voices hissing through the veil of his consciousness. They had been there before, in the distant corners of his mind, subtle and patient. But now they grew stronger, beckoning him, offering something. You were meant for more. Anakin's breath hitched. He shook his head, trying to dismiss them, but the whispers curled around his thoughts like smoke. They are afraid of you. They hold you back. You could be so much more. A vision struck him. A golden throne, vast and radiant, but cracked. A dying god, shackled by his own design. And beyond him, a swirling abyss, pulsing with infinite possibility. Beyond the veil, your destiny awaits. Anakin gasped, breaking free of the vision, sweat beading on his forehead. His heart pounded against his ribs. He forced himself to lie back down, his mind racing. He needed sleep. He needed clarity. He needed to silence the voices. Finally, sleep came to him, and he had the luxury of a few hours of peace. He was awoken early the next morning by a servitor who told him that he was ordered to report for training this very moment. The training hall deep within the Imperial Palace was vast, a colosseum of polished marble and golden light. Statues of long-forgotten warriors lined the walls, their eyes cold and unyielding. Anakin Skywalker stood at the center, his blue lightsaber ignited, its blue glow a stark contrast against the grand Gothic architecture of the Imperium. Opposite him stood Horus, the War Master, the greatest of the Emperor's sons. Anakin had faced many warriors in his training, custodians, Astartes, but nothing compared to standing before a Primarch. Horus exuded power, his immense frame clad in intricate Baroque armor that gleamed under the chamber's light. His golden eyes studied Anakin, measuring him, assessing. The Emperor himself watched from a gilded throne above the training ground. His presence was overwhelming, yet silent. This was a test, not only of Anakin's skill, but of his control, his restraint. Horus inclined his head, a smirk playing at the edges of his lips. "Come, young one, show me what the Emperor's new protege is capable of." Anakin took a steadying breath, shifting into a combat stance. He had dueled his masters before, but Horus was something else. The Force whispered its warnings even before Horus moved. Then the Primarch struck. Horus's speed was inhuman, a blur of motion as his massive blade descended, forcing Anakin to barely sidestep the blow. The ground cracked where the strike landed, marble splintering like glass. But Anakin retaliated, twisting around the attack, his lightsaber flashing in quick, precise arcs. The duel became a storm of movement. Anakin weaved through Horus's relentless assault, relying on his agility, his precognition guiding each dodge. His blade struck against the War Master's armor, but it barely left a mark. Horus was a titan, an unstoppable force of nature. "Impressive," Horus admitted, deflecting a rapid flurry of strikes with effortless ease. "But skill alone will not fell a god." Anakin grimaced, sweat forming on his brow. He needed an opening. Then it happened. Horus fainted, his speed suddenly beyond what Anakin had accounted for. A massive gauntleted fist shot forward, slamming into his torso. The impact sent Anakin flying, his body crashing against the far wall with a sickening thud. Stars exploded in his vision as pain flared through his ribs. Horus approached, blade at the ready. "You fight well, but you are still just a boy." Something inside Anakin snapped. Pain turned to anger. Frustration burned within him, and the Force surged to his call. Without thinking, he lashed out. An invisible shockwave erupted from him, slamming into Horus like a thunderclap. The Primarch was actually forced back, his massive boots skidding across the marble floor. The statues around them cracked and fell, dust and debris filling the air. A stunned silence filled the chamber. Anakin panted. His hands were trembling. He had never unleashed such raw power before. It had felt effortless, intoxicating. But then a voice cut through the silence. "Enough." The Emperor stood. His golden gaze was locked onto Anakin. Power radiated from him, far greater than anything Anakin could comprehend. Horus straightened, giving a respectful nod to his father. Anakin looked down at his shaking hands, horror dawning on him. He had lost control. but the Emperor's voice was steady, yet heavy with meaning. "You walk a dangerous path, Anakin Skywalker." Anakin swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had held his own against a Primarch. No mortal had ever done so before. But at what cost? The power within him was growing, but so too was his anger, and he feared where it might lead him. The battlefield was a wasteland of fire and carnage. Anakin Skywalker stood atop a crumbling ridge, his dark robes whipping in the wind as he gazed upon the hellscape below. The orcs had come like a storm, their war, a relentless tide of destruction. Green-skinned monstrosities rampaged through the ruins of an imperial city, their crude war machines belching fire and smoke, their guttural war cries shaking the very earth. The Imperium had sent its might to stop them. Astartes, regiments of the Imperial army, even a cadre of custodes, and at their head, leading the charge, was Anakin Skywalker. The years under the Emperor's tutelage had changed him. He had grown taller, his presence more commanding. His golden hair was tousled by the winds of war, and his eyes, once bright with youthful defiance, now carried the weight of experience. He was no longer the uncertain Padawan, plucked from another reality. He was a warrior, a leader of men, and on this day, he would prove it. A custodes stepped beside him, clad in gleaming armor, his voice gruff. "The orcs press hard, Lord Skywalker. We must hold until reinforcements arrive." Anakin tightened his grip on his lightsaber. "Reinforcements won't get here in time. We take the fight to them now." The custodian hesitated. It was not his place to question the Emperor's chosen protege, but even he could sense something dangerous in Anakin's resolve. Yet there was no time for debate. The orcs surged forward again, their war cries growing louder. Anakin ignited his saber. "Follow me." The charge was glorious. The ground trembled as Imperial forces met the orcs in a clash of steel and fire. The Astartes cut through the horde with disciplined brutality, their bolters roaring like thunder. The custodes, golden titans, fought as demigods, their guardian spears striking with divine precision, and in the heart of the carnage, Anakin was a storm of death. His lightsaber weaved through orc flesh, severing limbs, carving through crude armor like paper. He moved faster than any warrior on the battlefield, his strikes guided by the Force. An orc swung a rusted cleaver the size of a man at him, and Anakin ducked, driving his saber into the beast's chest before launching it backward with an unseen force. Another brute lunged, only to be hurled into the air by an invisible grip and slammed down with bone-shattering force. The Imperium fought harder with him at their lead. They had seen warriors of legend, but none like this. None like Anakin. Then the tide turned. A deafening roar echoed over the battlefield as a massive war machine rumbled forward. A stomper, its metal bulk covered in spikes and crude glyphs. Its cannons unleashed a barrage of destruction, ripping through the Imperial lines. Dozens of warriors were incinerated in an instant, battlefield consumed in fire. More war machines followed, rolling over the ruins like an unstoppable tide. The Imperials began to waver. Anakin saw Astartes crushed beneath iron treads. He saw custodians overwhelmed by sheer numbers. His forces were losing ground. The battle, the cause, would be lost. And in that moment, something within him snapped. A cold fury surged through his veins. The whispers in his mind, the ones he had tried to ignore, grew louder. Unleash it. He clenched his fist, and the battlefield trembled. The stomper halted mid-stride as an invisible force crushed its legs with the strength of a collapsing star. Metal screamed as the entire war machine crumpled inward, its pilot roaring in confusion before being obliterated in an implosion of steel. The orcs turned, momentarily stunned, and then they died. Anakin moved like a vengeful god, his hand outstretched as the force roared to life. Orcs were lifted into the air, their bodies twisting unnaturally before being hurled into their kin. War bosses, creatures that had stood unbeaten for decades, were crushed with mere gestures. The ground itself cracked beneath Anakin's wrath. Bolts of lightning crackled from his fingers, incinerating swaths of the horde. He was no longer fighting. He was annihilating. The orcs, who had never known fear, began to falter. Behind him, the Imperials watched in stunned silence. To the Astartes, he was magnificent, a warrior blessed by the Emperor himself. They roared their approval, pressing forward with renewed zeal. The Custodes, however, did not cheer. They exchanged uneasy glances, recognizing something darker in the way Anakin fought. He was not wielding power, he was indulging in it. From high above, aboard his golden flagship, the Emperor watched through psychic sight. His expression remained unreadable, but within the depths of his ancient mind, concern stirred. Anakin stood amidst a field of corpses, his chest heaving, his arms trembled, not from exhaustion, but from exhilaration. The power, it had felt incredible, limitless. The voices in his mind whispered again, softer this time. See what you can accomplish. You are not meant to be restrained. There is so much more. The battle was won. The orcs shattered. The Imperium victorious. But Anakin Skywalker was changed. That night, in the quiet solitude of his chambers, he stared at his reflection. His face was the same, but his eyes, they seemed different. There was something behind them now, something that had always been there, waiting. Was this truly the dark side? The Jedi had spoken of it as a poison, a corrupting force, but the Imperium did not share such philosophies. The Emperor himself wielded power beyond comprehension. Had he not told Anakin that strength was the only true path? The door to his chamber hissed open. A figure stepped inside. Horus. The War Master folded his arms, regarding Anakin carefully. That was impressive. Anakin did not reply. Horus stepped closer. You do not need to fear what you are, Anakin. The Emperor's sons are warriors beyond measure, but even we saw what you did today. You are different, and different is not always a weakness. Anakin looked up. What if it is? What if I lose control? Horus smiled, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. Then you learn to control it. No one else will do it for you. Anakin searched his gaze. There was something about Horus. His presence, his confidence. Unlike the Emperor, he did not lecture. Unlike the Custodes, he did not watch with suspicion. Horus understood. The voices in Anakin's mind murmured in approval. As Horus turned to leave, he glanced over his shoulder. Rest well, brother. There will be more battles, and the next time, I want to see what you're truly capable of. Anakin sat in the dim light, staring at his hands. The power still lingered, just beneath the surface, and for the first time, he wondered if the Jedi had been wrong all along. The galaxy burned with the fires of conquest. The Great Crusade was at its height, world after world falling before the relentless march of the Imperium. The Astartes, godlike warriors clad in ceramite and faith, crushed all who stood in their way. The Emperor's dream was manifesting, a vast and unified empire built on reason and war. And yet, for Anakin Skywalker, victory tasted bitter. He stood upon the bridge of the Imperator Invictus, the battle barge assigned to him, staring out at the void. His golden eyes, once filled with defiance and ambition, now carried a storm beneath their surface. The stars whispered to him in the quiet, a voice not his own. The battle within was growing stronger. Below him, the surface of Uruk's 9 burned. Another world that had resisted the Imperium. Another world that had been shown the cost of defiance. The remnants of its defenders were little more than ash, their civilization wiped away in a single night. The Astartes had done their work well. But the executions, the purges, the inquisitorial agents ensuring compliance by eliminating all but the most servile of survivors. It churned his stomach. He had seen brutality in war, but the Imperium made no distinction between justice and annihilation. He clenched his fists, his mind a maelstrom of doubt. Was this truly the peace the Emperor had promised? Horus had noticed his unrest. They had fought side by side in countless battles, but the War Master saw something shifting within Anakin. Over time, their conversations had grown longer, more probing. Horus did not condemn his doubts, he cultivated them. "The Imperium is not the paradise you imagined, is it?" Horus had said one night, the two of them walking through the vast halls of his flagship, Vengeful Spirit. Anakin hesitated. "I thought I was fighting for something greater than fear." Horus nodded. "And yet, fear is the greatest tool of this empire. Do you think the people sing the Emperor's praises because they love him? No, brother. They kneel because they know no alternative." Anakin had no answer. He only saw the faces of the dead, of worlds left in ruins. That conversation haunted him. Seeking clarity, Anakin made a fateful choice. He set a course for Prospero. The moment his shuttle breached the atmosphere of the Thousand Suns homeworld, he felt it, the warp. It was as if the air itself carried whispers, unseen currents brushing against his skin. He had heard tales of Prospero's beauty, its grand towers and endless libraries, a world dedicated to knowledge. Even after the decree against psychic inquiry, Magnus the Red had refused to abandon his pursuit of enlightenment. Anakin was met by a delegation of Thousand Suns, scarlet-armored warriors whose every step seemed infused with restrained power. They led him to the pyramid of Photep, the central seat of Magnus's domain. Unlike the cold austerity of Terra, Prospero breathed. Statues of philosophers lined the halls, ancient texts floated with suspended fields of energy, and the air vibrated with knowledge untapped. Magnus awaited him in a great chamber, illuminated by ethereal light. The Crimson King stood tall, taller even than Horus, his cyclopean gaze piercing into Anakin's soul. He did not speak at first, only studied him, as if seeing into every shadowed thought that lingered in the young warrior's mind. Finally, Magnus spoke. "You seek truth." Anakin swallowed hard, but nodded. "I seek understanding. The Emperor tells me to master my power, but he will not tell me its true nature. I need to know what I am." Magnus regarded him with an unreadable expression before gesturing him to follow. "Then walk with me." They moved through the grand halls of the pyramid, past floating tomes that turned their pages without hands. Magnus spoke of the warp, not as a place of demons and madness, but as an ocean of potential. He explained its dangers, its temptations, but also its possibilities. "The force you wield, Anakin, is but a fraction of what lies beyond. Your power is not an anomaly. It is the echo of something greater. The warp calls to you, and you hear it, even if you deny it." Anakin hesitated. "I felt whispers." Magnus stopped walking. His lone eye studied Anakin with great intensity. "Whispers are the first sign of the warp's attention. It does not give, it takes. If you listen too long, it will consume you." Anakin clenched his fists. "Then why do you walk this path?" Magnus exhaled, a shadow crossing his face. "Because knowledge is the only way to master it. Fear of power leads to chains, and the Emperor's greatest flaw is his belief that he alone can wield the truth." Anakin understood. He had lived under the Jedi's doctrine of restraint, and then the Emperor's vision of control. Was there no path where he could be free? The whispers in his mind grew bolder. As Anakin prepared to depart Prospero, Magnus gave him a final warning. "You stand at a crossroads, Anakin. One path leads to obedience, to the Emperor's empire of order. The other leads to a different kind of power, but one that has broken many before you." Anakin's jaw tightened. "And which path is right?" Magnus shook his head. "That is something only you can decide." As his shuttle left Prospero's surface, the voices in his mind were no longer mere whispers. They were promises. Elsewhere, unseen forces took notice. Deep within the tides of the warp, entities of vast and malevolent intellect turned their attention toward the young warrior who teetered on the edge. A soul of such magnitude, such raw fury, was rare even among the Emperor's creations. Khorne, the Lord of Battle, rumbled with approval at the warrior's thirst for strength. Tzeentch, the architect of fate, whispered secrets, delighted by his hunger for knowledge. Slaanesh, the princess of excess, purred at the conflict within him, the pleasure of his growing doubts. And Nurgle waited, patient as decay itself. The Chaos Gods did not yet reach for him. No, not yet. They merely waited, for all things fall given time. Anakin Skywalker returned to his ship, a changed man. The light of certainty had dimmed within him. Visions he had once dismissed as dreams now haunted him in waking moments. And in the darkness of his chambers, he finally gave voice to the question that had lingered unspoken for too long. What if the Emperor is wrong? The galaxy was on fire. The Great Crusade, the Emperor's grand vision for humanity, was crumbling under the weight of Horus's betrayal. Civil war had erupted, brother turning against brother, legions clashing in brutal warfare across the stars. The Imperium teetered on the brink of all-out ruin. and Anakin Skywalker stood at the precipice of his own destiny. The war had reached Terra. Though the true battle had not yet begun, the halls of the Imperial Palace were heavy with tension. The custodies patrolled with a heightened vigilance, wary of assassins and traitors lurking in the shadows. The Emperor had retreated deeper into his sanctum, preparing for the inevitable siege. But Anakin could wait no longer. He strode through the corridors, his mind a storm of conflict. The whispers in his mind had grown stronger, more insistent. Horus had reached out to him, his words dripping with truth and venom alike. The Emperor does not trust you. He never has. He sees you as a tool, nothing more. Join me, Anakin. Together, we can forge a new order, one where you are not shackled by his chains. Anakin had not answered. Not yet. But the question burned in his mind like an open wound. Did the Emperor truly see him as nothing more than a weapon, a tool to be wielded and discarded when no longer useful? He needed answers. He reached the throne room. The massive doors loomed before him, guarded by a full squad of custodies. Their golden armor gleamed beneath the towering obsidian statues that lined the hall, their spears crossed in warning. "Step aside," Anakin commanded, his voice calm but firm. The leader of the custodies, Captain Valerian, hesitated for only a moment. "The Emperor is not to be disturbed." Anakin exhaled slowly. "I am not leaving without speaking to him." The custodies exchanged glances. They had all seen what Anakin was capable of. Though he was not of the Legionnaires Astartes, he was something else entirely. A force of nature wrapped in flesh. To deny him was to risk destruction. Valerian nodded once. The spears were raised, the doors groaned open, and Anakin stepped inside. The chamber was vast, bathed in golden light. The Emperor of mankind sat upon his great throne, his presence suffocating in its sheer enormity. The moment Anakin stepped forward, the Emperor's gaze turned upon him, pinning him in place with raw, overwhelming power. Anakin took a steady breath. "You summoned me." The Emperor's voice was deep and commanding. "Horus marches against us. He defiles the dream of unity I have forged. You will take a force and put an end to this rebellion." Anakin hesitated. "No." A silence fell over the chamber. The golden light seemed to dim, the air growing heavy. The custodies at the door tensed, but none dared move. The Emperor slowly stood from his throne. "Explain yourself." Anakin's jaw clenched. "This is all your fault." The words rang through the chamber like a thunderclap. The Emperor took a step forward, each motion carrying the weight of a god. "Careful, Anakin." Anakin's breath came sharper now, his heart pounding. "You took me from my world, from my path. You promised me purpose, but all I see is death. You built this Imperium on conquest, on blood, and now your sons turn against you. Tell me, did you ever care for them? For me?" The Emperor stopped a few paces away, his expression unreadable, but his presence was suffocating. "I do not see you as a tool, Anakin." Anakin's fingers curled into fists. He could hear the whispers in his mind, feeding his doubts, his rage. He shook his head. "I don't believe you." His hand slowly reached for his belt. "This war must end." The blue plasma of his lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss. The chamber was bathed in its glow as Anakin raised the weapon. "Your great crusade is wrong." And then he charged. The Emperor raised a single hand. A force unlike anything Anakin had ever felt struck him like a tidal wave. He was hurled backward, crashing into the chamber wall with a force that cracked the marble. The impact left him breathless, his vision swimming with bursts of light. He groaned, pushing himself up, his grip tightening around his lightsaber. Electricity crackled around his free hand. The Emperor watched him, unshaken. "You are powerful, Anakin, but you are ruled by your emotions. That is why you will fall." Anakin gritted his teeth. He launched forward again, his saber slashing in a blur. He struck high, low, feinted left, before driving the blade straight toward the Emperor's chest. The Emperor did not need a weapon. He was a weapon. He moved with inevitability, dodging each strike as though he had already seen them 1,000 times before. Anakin snarled in frustration, pouring everything into his assault. His saber carved through the air in blinding arcs, each strike meant to kill. The Emperor stepped through it all unscathed. Then with a single motion, he lashed out. A golden gauntlet seized Anakin's throat mid-strike. The force of the grip was unbearable, crushing. Anakin's vision darkened, his lungs burned. He dropped his lightsaber, his hands clawing at the unbreakable grasp. The Emperor pulled him close, his golden gaze burning with finality. "I gave you everything," he said, "and still you are weak." The whispers in Anakin's mind screamed now. The Force, the warp, the very universe itself seemed to pull at him, demanding that he break free, demanding he embrace what he was meant to become. His vision darkened, and then the Emperor released him. Anakin collapsed to the ground, gasping, his entire body trembling. He looked up at the golden titan before him, his realization dawning. He had never been his son. He had never been anything more than a tool. And so, he made his choice. Anakin's vision swam with rage. The whispers in his mind turned to roars. His outstretched hand clenched into a fist. And then the lightning came. A blast of pure, crackling energy erupted from Anakin's fingertips, surging toward the Emperor with all the fury of a dying star. The Emperor raised his free hand, catching the lightning as it crackled across his golden gauntlet. The force of the blast sent a ripple through the chamber, the very air trembling with the sheer power behind it. For the first time, the Emperor took a step back. Anakin's eyes burned with raw defiance. The duel was far from over. The throne room trembled with power beyond mortal comprehension. The very fabric of reality strained as Anakin Skywalker and the Emperor of Mankind clashed, their battle shaking the Imperial Palace to its foundations. Golden arcs of energy clashed against the searing blue light of Anakin's lightsaber. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and burning power. Anakin poured everything he had into the fight. His lightsaber moved like a blur, each strike a whirlwind of speed and precision. He wove between the Emperor's golden gauntlets, slashing, stabbing, feinting, yet every move he made was countered with effortless precision. The Emperor was not just a warrior, he was the apex of human potential, a being so far beyond the limits of mortality that even Anakin's precognitive instincts struggled to grasp his movements. With a single motion, the Emperor raised his hand, and reality itself bent to his will. Anakin felt his body wrenched through the air, as if gravity had been inverted. He barely had time to react before he was slammed into the unyielding marble of the throne room floor. The impact cracked the ground beneath him, Pain lanced through his body. Before he could recover, the Emperor's golden form loomed over him, his eyes burning with judgment. "This is not your path," the Emperor said, his voice a force of nature. "You fight against the inevitable." Anakin spat blood and pushed himself up. "I fight for what's right." The Emperor tilted his head slightly, as if in sorrow. "You are ruled by anger. That is why you will lose." Anakin roared in defiance, reaching deep into the Force. No, deeper, into something darker. The whispers that had haunted his dreams coalesced into a singular, undeniable voice. Power surged through him, and his fingers crackled with dark lightning. He thrust his hand forward, unleashing a storm of raw energy. The Emperor raised his own hand, and the lightning met his palm, crackling harmlessly against his godlike presence. But Anakin pushed harder, feeding his rage, his sorrow, his desperate need to prove himself. The golden armor of the Emperor flared with radiance, and the force of the blast pushed him back a single step. Anakin's heart pounded. He had done it. He had forced the Emperor to move. But then, the Emperor spoke a single word. "Enough." A golden pulse exploded from his body, sending Anakin hurtling backward like a ragdoll caught in a hurricane. He crashed against the far wall, his ribs shattering on impact. His breath came ragged, pain lancing through every fibre of his being. The whispers in his mind screamed now, no longer distant, but fully present, fully real. "You cannot win, but you do not have to lose." Anakin looked up, barely able to move as the Emperor advanced toward him. He had given everything, and it still wasn't enough. For the first time in his life, he felt true fear. The shadows in the corners of the chamber twisted, shifting unnaturally. A presence slithered into his mind, wrapping around his broken body like a comforting embrace. "Let go, Anakin. We will catch you." The Emperor's golden eyes narrowed. "I see them now. You have heard the whispers." Anakin clenched his fists. He knew what was happening. He knew he should resist, but what choice did he have? The Emperor would never allow him to be free. He would never be anything other than a weapon in another man's war. "You are not his tool. You are meant for greater things. Come to us. We will give you the power to shape destiny." The shadows deepened. The warp was opening. The Emperor took another step forward, raising his hand. "Do not do this, Anakin." But Anakin had already made his choice. With the last of his strength, he reached out, not to the Emperor, but to the abyss. Reality shattered. A rift tore through the throne room, howling with the screams of the damned. A crimson vortex spiraled into existence. The stench of sulfur and death poured from its depths. Anakin felt himself pulled toward it, 1,000 voices calling his name. The Emperor lunged forward, his golden gauntlet reaching for Anakin's arm, but it was too late. With one final defiant look into those burning golden eyes, Anakin Skywalker let go and fell into the warp. Terra burned. Far above, the void was ablaze. The siege of Terra had begun. Horus Lupercal's forces descended upon the throne world, traitor legions clashing against the loyalists in a brutal war that would decide the fate of humanity. The battle had begun in earnest, a conflict so vast and terrible that even the gods watched with bated breath. But as Horus led his war against the Emperor, a ripple tore through the Immaterium. Something ancient had entered the warp, something new, something powerful, a presence unlike any the Chaos Gods had ever touched. Deep within the swirling madness of the warp, Anakin Skywalker drifted. His body was weightless, his mind unraveling. The voices around him were no longer whispers. They were roars of triumph and of hunger. He is ours now. Anakin's vision swam. The horrors of the warp clawed at his soul, offering promises, visions of power beyond anything he had ever imagined. He saw himself standing upon mountains of skulls, legions bowing before him. He saw the galaxy burning, but reshaped in his image. He saw himself as something greater, and in the darkness, 4 beings watched. Khorne, the blood god, beheld the warrior's fury and his thirst for battle. You were born to fight. Serve me and the galaxy will tremble beneath your wrath. Tzeentch, the changer of ways, whispered of destiny. You see the truth, don't you? The Emperor is a fraud. I will show you how to unmake him. Nurgle, the Lord of Decay, offered the comfort of inevitability. You need not suffer any more, child. Accept my gift and you will know peace. And Slaanesh, the Princess of Pleasure, sang songs of indulgence. You have known pain, you have known loss. I will give you everything you have ever desired. Anakin gritted his teeth. His entire life, he had been a pawn in someone else's game. The Jedi, the Emperor, the Imperium. Now these gods sought to claim him as well. No, he growled. The warp howled in protest. A new voice spoke, one that was deeper, darker, and far more dangerous. And forge your own path, Skywalker. Anakin felt the power surge through him, a storm of creation and destruction alike. He screamed as his body twisted, reforged by the will of the warp itself. When the screaming stopped, Anakin Skywalker opened his eyes, and he was no longer just a Jedi. The galaxy was burning. The Emperor prepared for his final battle against Horus. The Imperium fought for its very survival. And somewhere, deep within the warp, something far worse was awakening.
The Vengeful Spirit shook under the weight of psychic storms and orbital bombardments. Fires raged through its decks as the final confrontation approached. Lightning crawled across the hull like the claws of gods, raking at the bones of a dying titan. Within the heart of the War Master's flagship, where the warp bled into real space, the fate of the Imperium teetered on a knife's edge. Inside the throne room of the Vengeful Spirit, the Emperor of Mankind stood alone. His golden armor glowed with internal radiance, cracked and battered from the long war. His halo of light shimmered, a divine presence in the eye of the storm. And across from him, surrounded by the shifting, living metal of his corrupted warplate, stood Horus Lupercal, his favoured son, now turned to chaos. The room pulsed with malevolent energy, the walls twisted with demonic faces, whispering obscenities in languages that burned the mind. Beneath their feet, the deck was a scorched battlefield of melted ceramite and splintered reality. "Father," Horus said, voice layered with growls from things that wore his soul like a mask. "Why do you fight? You've already lost. Mankind belongs to chaos now." But the Emperor said nothing. He raised the sword of the Imperium, its golden blade ablaze with the power of uncountable souls. Horus's own clawed hand surged with warp fire, his talons stretching like vipers, hungry for blood. And then they clashed. The impact shattered the chamber. Golden light slammed against corrupted sorcery, a maelstrom of divine fury and unrelenting hatred. Time fractured. The warp screamed. Every blow shook the ship as if the gods themselves grappled in its heart. Horus's claw tore through golden armor, raking divine flesh. the Emperor responded with a wave of psychic force that blasted through void shields and ruptured reality behind him. "You taught me to fight," Horus snarled, striking again and again. "And now you die by your own lessons." "You were to be humanity's hope," the Emperor replied, "not its damnation." They fought across the room, blows fast enough to crack causality, power enough to unmake worlds. The Emperor's strikes glowed with the purity of unbroken will, while Horus's were filled with endless wrath and the entropy of chaos. But slowly, inevitably, the Emperor began to falter. The wounds grew deeper and his light dimmed. Horus raised his claw for the killing blow, when reality cracked with a thunderclap. A rift tore through the air. Warp lightning lanced from its edges as a storm of dark fire surged into the chamber. And from that rift stepped a figure clad in obsidian armor, etched with glowing red veins of barely contained energy. A tattered cloak billowed behind him, and in his hand ignited a crimson lightsaber that hummed with restrained fury. Anakin Skywalker had returned. Horus froze, his claw hanging mid-air. "You?" Anakin strode forward slowly, the crimson light of his saber reflecting off the golden ruin around him. "I saw what comes," he said. "The galaxy drowning in fire, billions screaming in the dark, a god dying on Terra. I can't let that happen." "You chose him," Horus snarled, pointing at the Emperor. "You chose the tyrant who broke you." Anakin's eyes, now swirling with a controlled storm of force and warp, burned into Horus. "I didn't come back for him." He turned to the Emperor briefly. "I came back for mankind." Without another word, Anakin lunged. The red saber met Horus's claw in an eruption of sparks and power. Horus howled in surprise as Anakin drove him back with a flurry of blows. Each swing was a perfect union of lightsaber mastery and warp-infused speed. Anakin moved like a storm given form. The Emperor, battered but not broken, rose and rejoined the fight. Together, they were unstoppable. Anakin's crimson blade carved through Horus's corrupted defenses, slicing runes and shattering demonic wards. The Emperor followed with blasts of golden psychic might that stripped away layers of Horus's protection. The War Master roared and lashed out, breaking ribs and sending Anakin flying into the wall. But Skywalker rose, snarling, and returned to the fray with even more ferocity. The three titans battled like gods. The Vengeful Spirit groaned, unable to withstand the force of their combined fury. Warp beasts screamed in the corners, devoured by the sheer force of their clash. Horus summoned demonic armor, blades, and fire, but Anakin twisted through it all with a warrior's grace and an anger now fully mastered, not feared. "You've changed," the Emperor muttered, voice thick with awe. "I've stopped holding back." With one final push, Anakin drove his saber into Horus's chest, just below his corrupted heart. Horus staggered, roaring, and for a moment the warp recoiled. The Emperor seized the opportunity. Golden fire exploded from his hand, an apocalyptic spear of psychic destruction. It pierced through Horus's core, burning away the warp infection. The demonic gifts and the betrayal. It reached into his soul and annihilated it. Horus's body convulsed and crumbled. His form disintegrated into ash and shattered metal. The chamber was silent. Anakin and the Emperor stood amidst the wreckage, bloodied, burned, but victorious. The Emperor fell to his knees, coughing blood. Anakin moved to steady him. You saved me, the Emperor said, his voice weary. No. You saved all of us. Anakin looked down at him, breathing hard. I didn't do it for you. I know, the Emperor said. He looked up, pain and guilt etched across his divine features. I failed you. I saw what you were, what you could be, but I used you, and I was wrong. Anakin fell silent for a moment, then extended a hand and helped the Emperor to his feet. I saw what happens without you. The Imperium turns into something worse than what you tried to stop. Mankind loses its soul. That can't happen. The Emperor nodded. Then help me save it. Not as a weapon, not as a slave, as an equal. Anakin's expression softened, but there was still steel in his eyes. I'll help, but the Imperium has to change. No more blind obedience, no more silence through fear. If we don't fix the rot, there will always be another Horus. The Emperor placed a gauntleted hand on Anakin's shoulder. You are like a son to me, and you're right. Then we have work to do, Anakin said, gazing out through the cracked hull of the Vengeful Spirit into the void beyond. The storm of the warp was receding. The siege of Terra still raged, but something new had entered the equation. Hope. The two most powerful beings humanity had ever known stood together, scarred, bloodied, but united. The future had changed, and for the first time, there was light at the end of the darkness.